Well, welcome to this next session. Vicky's going to sign, and Fiona Woolf is going to lead the session, and indeed it is her idea. Just to explain a little of the structure of WOW, we have a WOW support committee who've been with me since 2010, developing WOW ideas. And then we also have a committee for WOW 14, of which Fiona is on. Again, thinking about what is the content and the method of giving the content out in this fourth year. So I'd like to thank Fiona for her support in doing that. Now, I'm going to read you Fiona's CV, because actually it's got a fascinating route through it with regard to women in technology, actually, in a way. And we've just been talking about it at the previous session, as you know, with Maggie Aderin-Pocock. So at the moment, she is the Right Honourable, the Lord Mayor of the City of London, Alderman Fiona Woolf, CBE. And she's only the second in the history of London. That's correct, isn't it?
825 years.
825 years. There you are, nothing to worry about there. She's a partner at CMS Cameron McKenna. She's a leading electricity lawyer who's made a major contribution to electricity reforms and transmission projects. And that's really what I want to draw your attention to. Not so that you can discuss bills with her later on, but basically to this very detailed area of energy. She's created new regulatory regimes in over 40 jurisdictions, advised over 25 governments on reform, strategy and privatisation, and been a strategic advisor to the World Bank, governments and corporations for 20 years. She was awarded the CBE by the UK government for her contribution to the UK's knowledge economy and invisible earnings. She's a former member and director of the UK Competition Commission, a non-executive director of Veolia Water Central PLC, past chair of Main Board, and president of the Law Society, and an alderman of the City of London. She's a member of the government's Women's Business Council, and in 2011 was awarded a TIAW World of Difference 100 Award by the International Alliance for Women. And so you can see this is a woman of great achievement, but also in a world that very, very traditionally has been occupied almost exclusively by men in this country, and in many countries still is exclusively a world of men. And I single this out because there are women who don't use their influence and power to then turn around and say, right, how do we change the world? Because being an exception to the rule can actually be quite an attractive place to sit for a while. But actually putting your influence and power, however you define it, back out again and say, can we change the rules? Can we change the world? That is what a woman of influence can do at her best. And Fiona's doing just that. So I'm going to hand over to her to lead the panel. And thank you, Fiona.
Well, thank you, and welcome to everybody, and good afternoon, I think we are now at. And we're thrilled that we've actually got a full capacity audience for what is perhaps a different topic to the typical diversity and inclusion topic, and one which my colleague Charlotte and I have been thinking about a lot for, how long have we been thinking about it? 2 years, something like that. Before I introduce the panel, let me just explain why we are all here in the Queen Elizabeth Hall, well named this afternoon. The fact of the matter is that if you get to be the second woman since 1189 to be the Lord Mayor, it is actually a fantastic opportunity to put diversity and inclusion in front of everybody in the City of London. The City of London is not noted for its diversity and inclusion, sad to say, even though it's a very international place. And there are a lot of people from a lot of different countries, ethnicities, backgrounds, cultures, and that is actually what the city is really known for and what makes it great. But is it capturing the benefits of diversity, and particularly why at the top are there so few women? Charlotte and I were part of an exercise to run a survey of what the perception was of the city, and the result came back 87% of men, 87% of women, it was curious it was the same number, really felt that the city was asleep at the wheel. So we thought to ourselves, well, it would be fine to discuss the importance of diversity and inclusion, but don't we all know that now? So shall we talk about how we capture the benefits of that, and more importantly, how we get talent into the pipeline and all the way up to the top of it? What seemed to be startling with the statistics was that there was a lot of interest from the captains of industry who'd been working on this agenda for quite a while, but couldn't really understand why it was taking so long. And when you look at the statistics of women in senior executive positions, even with a bit of pushing and shoving over the last 3 years, we're actually still only at 7.2%. So what is going on? Well, there's lots of analysis, but actually Charlotte and I said, what are the solutions? Who are the people who are the keepers of the talent pipeline, and what can we do to get their attention and to help them? And if you think about it, actually there are lots of keepers of the talent pipeline, and they are from the sort of lower middle all the way up to the top, and they're recruiting, they're responsible for career progression, for appraisals. They are also responsible for work allocation, experience gain, and what we tend to call talent management. Now, the problem with the big middle is that they are very busy doing the work, and they're also terribly busy thinking about where the next piece of work is going to come from, and really the culture of their organizations is such that that is what matters. Everybody knows it. They might be rewarded by some other measures, but nevertheless, actually, everybody knows that's what matters. They'd also like to go home at night. So talent management and capturing the benefits of diversity is not going to be, for good understandable human reasons, top of the agenda. So what can we do about that? And that was where the Power of Diversity program came from, because I'm an electricity lawyer, you understand I'm using the word power and transformation and all that stuff this year. So that's where all this has come about. And talking about it with organizations in the city and outside, not just the banks and insurance companies, but also the professional service firms, the engineers very interested, the National Grid very interested. We'll talk about that in a moment. They said, look, we're all in this together. So what we want to do is collaborate, and we'd like to share our ideas and best practice and experience of what works and what doesn't, and I'll test a few ideas on you later. But we'd also like to collaborate to raise consciousness, and we would like to achieve collaborative change. This is nothing to be achieved by working in silos on this one. So if we put energy into it, there you are, another energy metaphor. If we put energy into it, we could get the wave all the way up the beach. Are you into renewables, Cheryl?
Yes.
Yeah, there you are, wave power.
And wind.
So that is that's the big idea of the power of diversity. Look out for the 3 Power of Diversity buses that are running around central London at the moment with these organisations, 36 of them, saying, we are dedicated to diversity. They'll be running around for 10 months. So keep an eye out for them. So with that by way of an introduction, can I introduce you in no particular order to the panelists, who will give us their thoughts in a moment, and then we absolutely want to tap into your thoughts, because that's actually what we're here for. I have to say that Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson needs no introduction to any of you, the Paralympian of Paralympians, but fantastic advocate, not just for the disabled, but for actually good governance and decision making that overcomes all sorts of fears of the unknown. And she's on boards. She's working with Transport for London, obviously the Legacy Authority. And so there isn't anything that she doesn't know about the subject. Then we have Cheryl Bart, who flew in from Australia yesterday and had a sleepless night last night because she woke up in Australian time, which is about 3 a.m. here. And she's a lawyer. Actually, she's occupied the same space as me. Would you? Another role model, women in the world of engineering and electricity. But she's on the board of the American Broadcasting Corporation and been on the board of, now this is very, very male, football board as well. And then we have Leonard Cumberbatch, who is, her job description is consultant, University of Cambridge. I mean, doesn't that sound posh? An advisor to a lot of organisations, and I'd like you to know that we are very diverse indeed, because actually, what we care about is not just gender diversity. Although I know we're on the eve of International Women's Day, and we're here to celebrate that. And this is, after all, women of the world. And we care about women around the world and are thinking of them powerfully today. But actually, we women always want to set the diversity agenda in the widest possible setting with all streams. So disability, LGBT, black minority, ethnic, whatever you want it to encompass. It's really about inclusiveness, disadvantaged backgrounds, and the whole way in which we have to reflect society, because otherwise we are not tapping into the widest pool of talent that we can, and we need to do that to remain at the cutting edge. It's a question of competitiveness, but we also have fantastic opportunities these days to reach out and solve the challenges that society is facing. So, which one of you would like to start? Tanni?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here today. I thought I'd just give you a little bit of background about me as an individual, because some of my life as an athlete is known, but being an athlete is just a tiny part of me as an individual. So I grew up in a family where I didn't realise I was meant to expect to be discriminated against, and so I'm Welsh. Actually, I get discriminated against for that. Not when we beat the English rugby team this weekend, but anyway. Oh, there's Welsh people here, thank you. I became paralysed at the age of 7, and that was really important for me in terms of how I perceived myself, and also for my family, because until the age of 7, people treated me one way, and then when I became a wheelchair user, a lot of people, even friends and family, started to treat me another way. And I kind of knew at a young age that, I don't know whether it's a British thing, but we like to put people in boxes. We like to identify people in certain ways. And I remember my father saying to me, you're not just disabled or a woman or Welsh. We're a bit like a Venn diagram. You know, you're a bit of everything, really. So actually growing up, I never really experienced any discrimination being a woman, because in the game of top trumps, disability is a bigger one than being a woman. So lots and lots of people treating me differently because I was in a wheelchair. Lots of people telling my parents when I was 7 that I would never go to university, I'd never get married, I'd never have a job, I'd never have all these things. And I was 7. And my parents were amazing because they were able to deal with that in a really positive way, and also gave me a lot of skills to deal with it. So when I was sort of turned away from going to a cinema at the age of 10 because the cinema owner said that I was a fire risk, my response was, I've never spontaneously combusted before. Really obnoxious child, actually, but you know. But having those skills to deal with it gives you a different perspective from it. So things like when I was pregnant, people stopping me in the street saying, how did you get pregnant? The mummy and a daddy who love each other very much. And and it's funny. I mean, luckily I find most of it funny. Not always, because there's lots of it that's really challenging. But also, from being an athlete, that gives you lots of skills to deal with people's perception, because people see you as an athlete compete at a major games, World Championships, Paralympics, and think that's the whole of your life. And actually, the reality in my life as an athlete was I spent most of my time training on the road, in the gym, really boring, very unglamorous. You spend most of it covered in snot. It's such a complete different part of your life. So for me, as I was coming through being a Paralympian, we thought lots of people believe in, actually, you can't be a sporty girl, but you can't be a sporty disabled person who's also a girl. And for me, I wanted to make sure that when I retired, that a lot of Paralympians and female Paralympians weren't fighting for the same things that I was. A lot of it has changed, and a lot of it is in a miles better place than it was, but it's not as good as it needs to be. And I have massively high aspirations for where I want to see not just elite sport, but where I want to see girls being physically active. So a lot of the work I do now is around women in sport. We spend a lot of time producing data, which is kind of useful, but also I think it's quite challenging at times, that it's like, oh God, it's her again, talking about women in sport. But some things which for me are worrying is that, you know, 80% of women aren't fit enough to be healthy. 95% of young girls would rather be thin than healthy. We have this huge pressure on women to look and behave a certain way. The aspiration to be size 0 is the size of an 11-year-old girl. So there's all this mismatch in terms of what we expect our female athletes and women to look like, and then trying to give young women confidence to say, you don't have to fall into that trap. In recent news, Rebecca Adlington, our most successful swimmer we have had in Britain, has been trolled in the most abusive way because of the way she looks. And we don't do that with our male athletes. We don't say, such and such footballer, won't mention any names, looks a bit like a potato. Pick your footballer that you want. But we do that to our women in sport, and it's a massive challenge. Not enough coverage of women in sport. Less than 5% of our sports coverage goes to women. Not enough women on boards. I had a very interesting discussion with a governing body last year where they decided to appoint the woman's representative and then explained to me why she didn't need to be a woman. And then, I mean, it's almost hysterical. And then said, well, of course, they'd only be allowed to talk about women's issues. So I said, the whole of the sport then? Oh, really? So actually, listening to things like that kind of make me want to keep going, because actually in sport, it's about continually looking forward and continually trying to change things. What's hard as an athlete is that, saying you're really focused on your career, you're trying to do a million different things, it's really difficult to try and help people, bring people through. My work now, I sit in the House of Lords. The amazing thing about that is I'm there till I die. Well, everybody is, actually. Not in the building, but you actually, in the career I have now, I do have time to help other women. And a lot of what I do is talking to young athletes and young successful athletes to say, come on, you need to be part of the discussion, because it makes my argument stronger if there's lots of other women talking about this as well. And I think some of the successes, because I think it's always, as much as we talk about all the challenges, you know, some of the successes we saw around diversity, around Olympics and Paralympics, I thought my role there would be to sit there and continually say, and what about the Paralympics? And what about disabled people? And I never had to do that, because so many of the people who worked in the organisation, not all of them, got diversity, because they got that it made business sense. You know, the job of the Games is to sell tickets, plus lots of other things. And for me, that was hugely motivational, because it was around really positive people who tried to move the discussion forward. And that's one of the things that, you know, not everything was perfect, but that's one of the things that gives me a huge amount of motivation to keep going, because by chipping away at the corners and getting more women involved and more men involved, we can make a really big difference. And that's kind of what we have to do, because the argument isn't done. One of my biggest frustrations, and the final thing I'm going to say, is that I talk to a lot of young athletes, because the sponsorship deals are better, because there's a bit more media coverage, because it's better than it used to be. They kind of think we're there, and you kind of go, no, we're not, because actually we should be, you know, on an equitable level. We should be having the same sponsorship deals. We should be having, you know, 50% media coverage. We should have people recognise that, you know, women's sport is different, but it's still sport. And until we get there, we've got a really long way to go. Thank you.
Well, I'm sure we'd all agree with that. And I take away a message about get more people involved. And yeah, we're all in it together. Right, Cheryl.
Oh, thanks. That's a hard act to follow. Thanks for doing that. Give it to the tired Aussie. So just in keeping with Tanni, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm originally a banking and finance lawyer who ended up in the electricity industry. I'm now pretty much a full-on company director across very much male worlds of electricity, infrastructure such as ports, banking. I chaired a film corporation. There was quite a good diversity there. And then in sports as well. So I'm on the board of the Asian Cup Soccer, which is going to be in Australia in 2015, and recently elected to the Football Federation of Australia, which is the governing body of football, or soccer as we call it, in Australia. So I'm very much involved in a male world. My claim to fame is nothing close to Tanni in the Paralympians, but I've had a little bit of sports and have always had sports in my portfolio. When between 2000 and 2008, my daughter, who was then 16 until she was 24, and I embarked on a journey, and we ended up climbing the 7 summits of the world, which is the highest continent, the highest peak on each continent, culminating with climbing Mount Everest. So we were the first mother-daughter in the world to climb Everest. So that also was a highly male environment. Fantastic. And I can't tell you how many times we would be at the bottom of a mountain and there were guys there, you know, they would be ultra-marathon men, Navy SEALs, and they'd look at me, and I don't have the right look about the mountain. I'm not Reinhold Messner, hairy guy, and my daughter looks like me, but younger, prettier, blonder, and they'd say, oh, you two are finished, you know, you're never going to make it. And it was always us who would continue up the mountain slowly and steadily, and those guys who were being carried down in stretchers, and we'd flick our blonde hair and say, too bad, you know. Or else they'd say, you know, you've probably got a blow dryer in that heavy backpack. And I'd say every time, if I could find a solar-powered blow dryer, it would be in my pack, I'm telling you. So in terms of, you know, I agree with everything that's been said so far about the need for diversity, you know, at board level, unless there's diversity, if you end up with 10 guys who, through unconscious bias, select exactly the same clone man, what's the point of having a board? What's the point of being there to challenge and to sort of set strategies and so on, when really you could have one guy doing it? You could have a benign dictatorship. There's no point in having a board. So if you want a good board, it really has to be a diverse board in terms of age, experience, gender, all diversity. Similarly, when it gets to the workforce, it's really a question of human resources in the most basic of that term, in that if you don't have women there, you're missing out on half the population of having your very best employees available. So it's actually very simple, but somehow that message hasn't yet come across. So Fiona has asked us to sort of consider a practical example today, in particular that middle management. You want me to say a few words on that now?
Please.
The middle management and the HR function, which is, as Fiona started off, is the ones who are really there at the coalface. So I think before that, even that middle management's even going to start to think about implementing anything, notwithstanding that they have a job to do, they want to go home, and all the other factors that Fiona so ably recounted, is it really does have to come from the top, from the CEO, from the board, saying we need a diversity, a gender diversity or a general diversity program. Otherwise, there is no impetus, there's no interest really, unless there's a particular interest. So the example I was going to pick was from the electricity industry. I sit on a board of a company called South Australian Power Networks. I've been involved in power since 1995. Very, very, very male. You know, a lot of tradies, apart from the middle management of the IT and the management and so on. And in this particular company, it actually became a matter of realising it's a very ageing workforce, and we really had to kind of recruit again and get some more people in. And through a lot of banging on the head and so on, they finally also really not only recognised but embraced that we need female apprentices as well. So we've been on a program, and we've been actually very successful, but I hasten to add we started off a very, very low base, where from the very beginning we had programs such as Chicks Rock in year 10 of high school, actually trying to show young women that there were positions for to be an electrician, even to be a lines person. There was a lot of there was possibilities that they had never even thought available for them. And in all countries where there's sort of unemployment issues, you really want to, again, show our young women the range of opportunities they have. Similarly, one of the great programs we instituted was called Powerful Pathways. Fiona spoke about collaboration. I completely agree. This was collaboration between the electricity companies, the technical colleges and the industry bodies to create a program where, again, young schoolgirls or just post-leaving school would come and be taught about what it means to be in this industry. There was a huge breadth of opportunities available to them. It actually was mind-blowing how they opened their eyes and thought, wow, I never even considered this as a possibility. So it was a pre-employment which also ran into an internship within the electricity company, and we've had some terrific results from that. So just the other day, in fact, I welcomed 27 new females to our organisation that had just arrived the last 6 months. I'd actually, as a board member, I'd taken it upon myself, working with our senior management, to write to each one of them and welcome them and invite them to morning tea. And it was, you had the sort of that middle management of the IT and so on, but then you had the young women in their kind of fluoro overalls, and I actually had to even stop myself for saying, oh, you look so cute in your fluoros, because they're pretty kind of tough girls. And what was really interesting was in this morning tea, they hadn't yet met one another, let alone meet the other levels in the organisation, and there was such a power and a strength of just saying hi to one another, and now they'll know each other when they're in the office or out at the depots or so on. But it was even interesting some of the things that these young women were saying. When they first went to these technical colleges, some of the teachers didn't take the girls seriously. The teachers would say, oh, you're here as an interest, sort of like macrame, But then they said what was really interesting is they showed that they worked so hard, they were so interested. And we all know this, when you convert someone who was previously a sceptic, they're often the greatest champions going forwards. So these teachers of these technical colleges have been trained by these young girls, which has been fascinating. But also these young girls were saying when they're out in the field, when you talk about the middle management, there was a lot of resistance to them. Issues such as sacred cows, where were the girls going to go to the toilet? What happens if they had their periods? How would that all work? And it was a matter of, again, other middle management coming together and taking the time to listen to the men who were feeling uncomfortable, really trying to understand their issues and trying to sort of progress it. So it takes, it's like a lot of things, you know, you sow what you reap. You actually need to put a lot of time in early to make everyone comfortable. The other things these young girls were saying was sometimes they're holding really heavy equipment as they're dealing with the power lines. So one of them said, oh, she's just getting stronger because she's lifting this sort of heavy load every day. But then another couple said, no, we've even come up with an idea of using a different piece of equipment and it will be lighter for us and actually more efficient, which then the OH and S person in the room says, well, we'd like to discuss that because that may be more efficient for the men as well. So there's very interesting, and that's what diversity does. It just brings fresh eyes and a fresh approach. So in terms of how do you get that middle management fired up, and then I'll stop talking when we can go back to it, was we actually did also employ a gender diversity manager who happened to be a female, so we really committed, but of course that woman can't do it all. Brought in people from the same industry who were credible to talk to our middle management about the successes and some of the challenges along the way. We looked at similar industries such as mining and manufacturing, and again tried to see where there were similarities and things that we could learn from. And it was this constant kind of iteration and support. And of course, one of the main things that we set were actual targets. We want to have X% more apprentices by. Why? So really what we were looking at was, first of all, educating young women that these opportunities were available. Secondly, attracting them to our organisation, the best of them. Thirdly, making sure that they then were, the third one was that there was a good retention rate, not that they arrived and left 5 minutes later. And then fourthly, that there was a development path for them within the organisation. So it's been a holistic program from school to this pathways to a whole kind of program within the organisation. So I'll stop there for now, but I'm happy to answer questions later.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. A subliminal message that's come out is that you can capture some hearts and minds if actually everybody feels that having the diversity and capturing it is actually going to deliver some benefit to them too. Right, Lenna, you're the professional. You're the.
I'm going to try. I guess we'll see. I'm going to stand up actually. Right, is that working? Okay. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, a little about what I think about diversity, and a little bit about us and diversity. I grew up down the road from here. I'm a Bermondsey girl. And for those of you who know, Bermondsey in the 80s was BNP, was National Front territory, so the predecessor to the BNP, the British National Front. But it wasn't until I was 11 that I realized that being black meant I was different. Now, I'd been through all of the injustices of growing up as a girl. I wasn't allowed to play football. I wasn't allowed to whistle. I wasn't allowed to climb trees or any other unladylike activities. But it wasn't until I saw "Deport All Blacks" written on the bus stop outside my school that I realized that meant I was different. And so it's one of those things that we need to remember, that we don't grow up thinking of people as being different. We don't think of ourselves as something other. It's not until we get to a point where somebody tells you you're different that you realize that. So one of the projects that I work on is diversity role models. And we go around to schools and we go in and say, it's okay to be gay. It's okay if your friends tell you that they're gay. It's okay if your friends have aunts and uncles or brothers and sisters that are gay. And because we work as LGBT people and go into these schools and do this. I'm female, I'm black, I'm a lesbian, and I have a disability. But I'm also masculine, I'm a geek, calculator watch. I spent a lot of time studying in America. I even went to Catholic school. All of these different things make me the different, diverse, and individual person that I am. And I'm sure that I share many of those qualities with many of you in the audience, but it's the combination of those things that make what I bring to a room different than what somebody else brings. And that's what we're all talking about, is what we bring to the room. Got a little bit of audience participation here for you, if you don't mind. So, if you're able, can you cross your arms? Fold your arms. How many of you have the left hand sticking out on top? How many have the right hand? How about reversing it? Can you do it the other way? Right? Okay. Now that's what diversity is. Okay? It's completely natural and automatic for you to cross your arms the way that you cross them. But if you try to do it the other way, it's a foreign concept, but it's the most natural thing for the person sitting next to you. All right? Okay. So that's what we're talking about when we're bringing diversity in, is bringing that different experience to each person to a different room. So my first job, I worked in a hospital in America. And a few weeks after I started there, an email went out saying, we're going to review the dress code. I was a bit worried, but I decided I'm going to fight the dress code. It was going to be one of my things. I was going after it because I dress like this. What's the dress code going to look like for me? And I read the old policy and it said, men must wear nice trousers and a shirt and a tie, and women must wear skirts that go down to their knees and wear stockings. And I thought, there's no way in hell. But I waited for this new policy to come out. It was a week or so, and it came back, and the policy said, employees must dress appropriately for the workplace. That was it. I thought, I changed the dress code. I like to think that it was me that made them change the entire dress code of the entire hospital across the... Maybe it had nothing to do with me, but I like to think that that was the reason why. Now, the policy is great, but the policy wouldn't have happened if there wasn't a culture that enabled that policy to happen. One of the, my examples is the constitution of the legislation in South Africa. One of the, for all intents and purposes, best constitutions there must be in terms of equality legislation in the world. And yet it doesn't matter because the culture hasn't adopted it. So that's one of the hard things that you have to deal with, is not just creating rules and regulations. They're important and they're absolutely necessary, but they're not going to do anything if you don't make it possible for people to use them and utilize them. And I guess that's where we come in, is looking at how we make those differences and we make those changes. Now, some of the things that we do as individuals can be really minor, tiny little things. My favorite one is, you know, when you're writing a letter or an email or communication to somebody and you don't know who it is and you write, dear sir or madam. Why can't you write, dear madam, sir? It's really, really simple, but they'll notice, I promise you, because you noticed, right? It's really simple. Or you've got something tomorrow that's happening, the Million Women Rise March. It's a big march happening in central London, and it's about bringing awareness for violence against women. So you can go and be an activist and be in something big like that that's happening through central London. One of the things that I've noticed about working in these sorts of environments in different places, I'm working right now at the University of Cambridge, and I'm pretty new there, but the thing that really drew me in, that pulled me in, that brought my attention was that they advertised, that they published information about the number of female professors they have. And they're not high on the list in terms of other universities around the country, but they publish that information. Now, if you're not going to do something about that, you hide that data. You don't tell anybody about it. You keep it hidden away. And one of the things that we did recently, we launched a book a couple of days ago called The Meaning of Success, and it looks at how women define success and what that means for them in an environment. And it's not just being a professor. For some women, it was having a happy work-life balance. And I think that's one of the things that we need to look at, is how we change an environment to make people more welcome in a situation and more comfortable there, because that is, for them, sometimes a successful aspect of what they're doing. And so all I can say now is, I'll finish off on saying, is we can all go out there and make our own small changes in the world. You can do little things. I go out and I'm a diversity role model. I use dear madam, sir. There are things that you can do as well, and I'm sure you can come up with things that you've done yourself and that you describe and would use every day on an everyday basis as well. Thank you.
Right, well, I'll definitely try the Madam Sir. I think that's a terrific suggestion. So it is over to you now, but I'd like to kick off just a little interactive session, if I may, by asking for a show of hands. And it's kind of thinking about the organizations that you know, that you're involved with, that you've seen on the outside or the inside. Can I ask you if you feel that you know a true meritocracy when you see one? How many of you know what a true meritocracy is? Oh. Okay, that's very, very small indeed. Like 4. If I would say to you, well, if I simply define it as a culture where there is obvious equality of opportunity, and that is just something that drives the whole organization. Can we have a show of hands on equality of opportunity? Right, so a bit more. All right. Sure.
For me, if we're going to really achieve a meritocracy, we need inequality of opportunity, so people who need more get more in order that they can rise.
Okay, so have you heard that? You won't have heard that. Where are the microphones? Are our hosts around with? Okay, shall I repeat it and you can nod your head if I got it right? We're saying it's not so much that we need equality of opportunity. We need inequality of opportunity so that the people who are not able to rise can actually do that by having the opportunity. Is that correct?
More or less. I think it's interesting that we have now a government that's comprised of people who started high and got higher. It's very hard if you're at the bottom to rise up without something extra being put in to support you.
And that, of course, takes us into another favoured topic amongst those who debate gender equality and diversity, which is, are you actually in favour of positive discrimination? Are you in favour of quotas? In other words, an obligation to allow women to act, or the disadvantaged, as you have quite rightly drawn our attention to, that will actually create places that can only be filled by those who are in the minority. So how many of you are in favour of positive discrimination? Okay, that's quite a lot of you. How many of you are not in favour? So it's kind of equally divided. We have quite a how many people abstained? Yes, there's a time-limited quota until you get to an equal to a level playing field. Who are in for time-limited quotas and positive discrimination? Okay, and that is a larger proportion. And then I think before I pass it into a more open question debate. How many organizations do you know of or part of where talent management and diversity are actually an explicit obligation on the part of at least those who are in some sort of management position of whatever level they're at. So are you aware of any diversity and talent management criteria that are applied to measure the successful performance of managers? We have a show of hands on that? Okay. I have to say, for me, it's not just a question of the internal communication and the internal rules of the game. It is actually about the way in which we look on the outside to our customers, to our stakeholders, to all the people who have an influence on us. And although much as I'm fond of talking about the business imperative of capturing the benefits of diversity for better decision making, nevertheless, we run the risk of really losing our license to operate if we don't actually look to the outside world and the impact that we're having on them and that they're having on us when we think about capturing the benefits of diversity. I would have loved to have been able to chair this all afternoon, and I'm sure that we could have carried on. But I did want to take the final minute, as it's 12:59 according to this clock, to thank on your behalf the panelists, Lenna and Cheryl and Tanni, of course, but also for all of you for being in this amazing space. I know Jude had hopes for its redevelopment, and I just love the way that actually the spaces around the Southbank are used not just for performances, but actually for debates, and just for bringing us all together. And so my final thank you is actually for you all being here and our being together, and I've taken lots away from that, and thank you.
Thank you. Well,